What's happening, everybody, and welcome back to the Chaplaincy on the Go podcast. I'm your host, Josh Zorhoff. I am a teaching pastor and a therapist in the West Michigan area. And this podcast is brought to you by the Fearless Chaplaincy and my good friends at Care Portal. Care Portal is a technology platform that helps individuals who are at risk of falling into the foster care system stay out of it through resources and helps from individuals, both organizations and local individuals, through the connection of the local church. We're so thankful for Care Portal and the work that they're doing in West Michigan and beyond, and we are thankful for their partnership in this podcast. We're continuing on in a conversation with Steve Carter, the author of a book called Grieve, Breathe, Receive. And Steve talks about his GBR journey, his Grieve, Breathe, Receive journey, and talks about how his own journey of grief helped him to understand what grief really is and how God meets us in that place of grief and how we can have a faith strong enough to hold on to us while we go through that grieving process. In our last episode, Steve shared a little bit about the heart behind the book and really around the question of what do you do when life does what it so often does? When life comes at you sideways, how do you respond? And in this episode, Steve shares a little bit about a framework to consider when we're going through grief. He talks about how we go through Good Friday, how we go through Silent Saturday, and how we also go through Sunday. And for those of you listening in who may not be familiar with those words or those days in terms of spirituality, Friday in the Christian tradition was the day that Jesus was crucified. Saturday was the day that he was dead. And Sunday was the day that he came back to life. And Sunday is the day of hope and resurrection. And Steve talks about the process of grief in those 3 days. Do you have a Friday? Do you have a Saturday? Do you have a Sunday? Do you have a day where it all falls apart? And a day where you're waiting for something to come, but it's not there yet. And then the day that it finally comes. And what does it mean to grieve as people who have hope? Steve's going to talk a little bit about that in this episode. He's going to talk about how our struggle can actually lead to something that is deeply sacred and that is deeply healing for us. So I'm excited for you to listen to that and dive into it right now. And it might not be another pandemic. It might not be this next election season, but it will be something that will knock the wind out of you. I sat with someone a few weeks ago who had a wind out of you moment. And he's like, I don't know what to do. In fact, he showed up at the church and he was just like, I needed to come someplace where I could just process. I needed quiet. And he had just lost his job and all of this. And it was raw, right? He's in my office. And I was like, hey, come sit in my office. My office is literally the quietest room in the church. It's soundproofed for podcasting. Like you can be in here as long as you want. And it was that wind out of you moment. He hadn't even caught his breath yet. And that's going to happen. That is going to happen to every single human being because suffering and pain are certain realities of our lives. They are unavoidable and inescapable. And because suffering and pain are unavoidable, then loss and grief along with it are unavoidable as well. So I think that's a huge part. And I think you're right. Like the church needs more leg day. Yeah. When it comes to grief, like we actually, of everything that we have to offer the world around us, a robust theology on grief is like our sweet spot because no book, as far as I am aware of, talks about grief and lament more robustly and in depth than the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's beautiful. And I think that's so true. And, I think for me, what was so helpful was, and, I've talked about this before, is like when I have a biblical framework. It just helps my life work. And the grieve, breathe, receive. I remember I was hiking in Arizona, and I just was like really trying to think through, okay, I had these 3 words, but I was like, what is a helpful framework for people that are on this grief journey to honor what comes up when change shows up? And all of a sudden, Holy Weekend just popped in my brain. And thinking about Good Friday, that was unfair. Like, here's a perfect man, an incredible rabbi, spoke to power, healed people, incredible teacher. He didn't get what he deserved. Right. He got something that just wasn't fair. Life came at him sideways. Yeah. And then if you think about Saturday, you have these disciples, they don't know Sunday's coming. The Saturday is like in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament was like this picture of the desert. It was just like that holy uncertainty, as you were talking about, like, where's this thing going now? Like, I don't know what's next. And then the surprise of Sunday. Yeah. And I think, like, as I started to realize, oh my goodness, like for many of us, when we've experienced grief, we've got to be the kind of people who can just simply ask ourselves, okay, what day of the week am I in? Oh, I feel like I'm in a little bit in Friday. Like, I'm in grief. Mm-hmm. Saturday, you're just trying to get through grief. Can I get through? Can I just get, like, you almost try to Jedi mind trick yourself. I just got to get through this as quick as possible. And then if you remember post-resurrection, Jesus showing up, and he's got the holes in his hand, and he shows Thomas. And I love that so much, because it's as if he's carrying Friday with him. Yeah. Like, and you'll carry the loss of that relationship, the death of that loved one. You'll carry that change of a job or move. And now you're in a place with new friends that aren't the same as your old friends. Like, you will carry that with you. You'll just learn to carry it differently. Yep. And I think for many of us is the full human spectrum of emotion. When you talk about Chuck DeGroat, who I just absolutely adore, that wholeheartedness is, I think, to be someone who can mourn with those who mourn and rejoice with those who rejoice, and everything in between. That you could be a person who can actually name your Friday, but also be a person who still holds Saturday and Sunday in full view, that, hey, I do believe in some shape or form Sunday is going to come. Yeah. And if you're someone who's in Saturday, you can name your Friday and you can name your Sunday. Or for many of us who are bright-siders, like, we just constantly are looking at we don't want to talk about Friday or Saturday. We want to, like, bypass the desert at all costs. That you could be someone who can hold out hope for Sunday, but also go, yeah, this happened in Friday, and here I am on Saturday, and I'm just not choosing an unhealthy escape. I'm choosing to win the weight and make my heart, mind, body, and soul really open to welcoming when Sunday does show up.
Your framework of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, probably for me, one of the most helpful biblical frameworks, not only because it's true and it really happened, but it is such an incredible metaphor for life. And there's this, in fact, I think I heard it long before I even met you. Stephen Argue, who was, Steve, you probably know of him because he was at Mars for a little while. He was my mentor in seminary, and he said teenagers live in Saturday. Like the teenage existence, if you want to break down developmentally, they are not adults yet. They're no longer children. They're in this space in between, and they're living in silent Saturday. And there's not a lot to look forward to in that. And when I read GBR, I was like, yeah, we actually all live in Saturday. Yep. And because when I was a child counselor, I worked with teenage boys, and I would constantly tell parents, I'm like, listen, they are living in a state of anxiety. Anxiety exists between the delta of where you are and where you want to be.
Mm.
And your child, your son in this teenage existence is literally anxious all the time. You have to flip the switch on that. And it's like, why are they angry? Because they're anxious. Why are they sad? Because they're anxious. Like they're not where they want to be. They don't get to be who they want to be. They're not kids anymore. They don't fit. They don't fit in their own skin. They don't fit in their own body. But the more I thought about that as I was reading GBR, Steve, I was like, but that is so true for me. Like, here's the problem. Wherever I am, there's some other place that I want to be. And
Mm.
as soon as I get there, the craziest thing is I want to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm constantly going to be in a season of liminal space between where I am and where I want to be. There's going to be anxiety there. There's going to be uncertainty there. And I have to learn how to, like, in your words, I have to learn how to breathe through that, grieve what is no longer, breathe through this liminal space, and then receive the reality of the resurrection in Sunday. And
Yeah.
that's literally every day.
Yep. Yeah. It is. And I think sometimes we think about grief really in this like linear piece,
Mhm.
but there's sometimes I'll feel like I'm in Sunday and then I'll get on Twitter and it'll take me right back to Friday. And then, you're just like, wait, that just threw me this other conversation. And I'm like, I feel like I'm back in the desert of Silent Saturday. And just being able to name
Oh,
what day of the week I'm in and that it
yes.
fluctuates, it just is like, okay, this just gives me a little bit of calm in that reality than feeling the anxious worry or anxiety of, I don't know what the hell to do now. I don't know where I'm at. It's just like, oh no, this is a human story. I'll
Yeah.
never forget when I was in Israel a number of years ago and I ran into a rabbi and I just asked the rabbi, and you and I were always just so choose curiosity and ask people random questions. But
Right.
I just went up to the rabbi and I was like, hey, I've been reading the Hebrew scriptures. Seems like primary environments, metaphors in the Hebrew scriptures are, Egypt, the desert, and the promised land.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
how much time do you think someone spends in each one of these places? And Egypt is its own version of Friday for the Hebrew people, and the desert Saturday, the promised land Sunday. And he's like, you Americans are so funny. You think
Mhm.
everything is up and to the right.
Right.
He's like, not us. We think 10 to 15% of your life is in Egypt.
Yep.
10 to 15% of your life is in the promised land.
Right.
And the remaining 70 to 80% is in the desert.
Yep.
And I think, Josh, that he said that. And I didn't like his answer because I didn't fully understand it
Yep.
until I found myself in
In the desert.
2018 walking through this and going, oh my goodness, that's what that rabbi meant.
Yeah.
And I think I had spent my entire life through achieving, through goals, through chasing, through performance, trying to bypass that holy uncertainty
Yep.
at all costs, to
Yep.
try and just push through any sense of being in that deserted place, forsaken place, uncertain place, and just get me to the promised land as fast as possible. And I realized, man, if I don't do the desert well, I'll never do the promised land well.
Yep.
And so just that for me too, and then thinking about the Hebrew people is just going also, they were probably like a month's journey away from the promised land when they crossed the Red Sea.
Yep.
But it took them almost 500 months of just wandering.
Yep.
And having to have that wholeheartedness shaped and formed into, and I love the word you used, that posture of trust of God, that God wasn't Pharaoh. Because it's one thing to leave Egypt. It's another thing to have Egypt leave you.
Correct.
And I think to open yourself up to the mystery and the wonder of a new kind of Sunday, a new kind of land that has been promised, a new kind of, and it's not the success that many of us have been told. It is that wholeheartedness, that just that sense of comfortable in your own skin, knowing that a God is with you and a God is truly for you.
So let's go on that for a minute, because for people listening, when we talk about the desert, we talk about the wilderness, we talk about the wandering. there was a general sense, for me at least growing up, is that God made the Israelites wander for 40 years, 500 months, as you said, Steve, um, because he was angry with them because they didn't trust him. And I thought that was true for like a long time. And then I went to the desert. I literally went to the desert of Israel, and I had my time of wandering with a leader, um and he said, you know, a lot of times we think that the wilderness was a punishment, but it wasn't a punishment, it was preparation. The
Preparation.
reality is God said, you're not ready. You're just not ready to be my people, and you're not ready to enter this promised land because you have lived in exile and slavery for so long that you actually don't know who you are anymore. And I feel like it is, in fact, those when life comes at us sideways moments, those are the moments, those Friday moments, they actually reveal to us our deficiencies. They reveal to us the places where we don't know who we are. Like, we thought we knew we thought we were CEOs, or we thought we were pastors, or we thought we were in charge, or we thought we were married to a faithful spouse, or we thought we had a good job, or we thought we were popular, whatever it is. We thought we were those things. And then life comes at us sideways, and a spouse dies, or we lose our job, or we find out that our friends don't trust us, or they were saying things about us. And we are stripped away of every self-made image of ourselves, or every thought that we had of who we were. And then we don't know who we are anymore. And so there's this loss of our identity. There's this loss of our purpose. And it is the grieving, and it is the process of the wandering where we actually learn who we really are.
Yeah, no, I think that's so spot on. One of the easiest ways to talk about, spiritual formation is, we have these simple truths. God
Mm,
is with me and God is for me, and we love Him. We love those, tweetable phrases. And then all of a sudden, when life comes at us sideways, the simple now has to entertain the suffering or the struggle.
yep.
And we have to ask ourselves, does that simple statement hold up?
Right.
God is with me in the deserted place. God is with me in the uncertainty. God is with me in my Friday and Saturday. And when you go through that process, and I love how you talk about that stripping down of everything that was self-made,
Yep.
you almost have this experience of having to both unlearn and relearn who God actually is,
Yeah.
to really prepare you for even a deeper meaning of what that simple phrase is. And so
Mm,
it moves almost from simple to struggle. And if you can allow yourself to be open to the mystery of how God proves that He is worthy of trust, that He is safe, that He is consistent, well, then that simple phrase now becomes wildly sacred.
yeah.
Now, when someone says, "Oh, God is with me," I'm like, I know exactly what that means. It's not
Yeah.
just some cognitive
No.
spoken, like I'm like some ethereal phrase that I have to try and state. It is a lived theology
Yep.
because of what I experienced in my Friday and in my Saturday. And
Yep.
that's the difference between um, when someone speaks with little life experience and
Yes.
when someone speaks from a place of anchored weightiness, from experiencing the blows of life and the
Yes.
punches, and yet they're almost standing with more hope and
Right.
with more grace and more peace
Yes.
in the midst of the storms and the uncertainty. That's the kind of father, husband,
Yeah.
man, pastor that I hope someday to embody.
Yeah.
But I think it's rarefied air, to be honest. We have a lot of people who can talk about it, but at the end of the day, don't know how to be about it.
Yeah, I love your language of simple, struggle, sacred, and I think then that becomes, if we throw in another S, it becomes a strength for
Ooh,
us,
yes.
because what is it? Etzer Kenegdo, like my struggle is my strength. In Hebrew,
Mm,
struggle and strength, they're sourced in the same place. You can't have strength without struggle. I mean, back to weightlifting or whatever. And I think, when we try simple, it's not untrue. It just hasn't been tested yet.
yeah.
You know, one of the things that I appreciate about Steve in his interview, but also just the way that he lives his life and the way that he writes, is he is honest about his struggles. He is honest about the seasons of life that were challenging for him. And he's honest about the way that he questions God. The reality is, for a lot of us, when we go through something difficult, we do question God. We question what he's up to. We question why he's doing what he's doing. And Steve embraces that and he models that really well. And he also tells us, hey, it's okay to have those questions. In fact, there's only really one way to grow in your relationship with God, and that's to question what he's up to and come to him in that, and then see that he is faithful as you go through. And so if you're going through a season of life, a season of grief right now, and you're questioning who God is, and you're questioning what God is up to, and you're questioning why all of this is happening, I just want to tell you, you're in really good company, because there are dedicated followers of Jesus like Steve who have been in the same situation that you're in now, or a similar situation, and they've asked those questions, and it is okay for you to go to God with that and ask those same questions. And if you're working through your grief or you're working through your struggles and you want to talk a little bit more about that with someone, reach out to us at chaplaincy@fearlessfollower.org, or you can check out our website, fearlesschaplaincy.org. We'd love to connect with you, love to talk with you, love to send some resources your way. And there'll be some links to Steve's books in the podcast notes and ways for you to connect with him more specifically, or learn a little bit more about what he's up to these days. We're so thankful for the time that you've put in here. That's all we've got for you now. We will talk with you later.